Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Planning and Highways Board. I'll hand you over at this point to Rachel for the housekeeping. No, not Rachel. Abby, I'm reading your notes.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I've forgotten my housekeeping notes, so I'll just make it up as I go along. There's no fire alarms planned for today, but if the fire alarm does sound, please make your way to the front. The congregation point is Tudor Square. I think that's it. I can't remember anything else. Sorry, Chair.
Don't worry, we've had so many versions throughout the COVID restrictions. It's been a roller coaster ride. No, that's okay. I'm going to sweep round the room and let people introduce themselves, or ask people to introduce themselves for the benefit of the people that are watching through video link. So if I come to you first, Bernard.
Yes, my name's Bernard Little, Councillor for Walkley.
Brian Holmshaw, Ward Councillor for Broomhill and Shire Vale.
Chris.
Councillor Chris Rosling-Joseph, Baton Ward.
And on to Zahira, please.
Councillor Zahira Naz, Councillor for the Donald Ward.
Councillor Tony Downs, Councillor for Southey Ward.
Peter Price, Councillor for Shire Green Brightside.
And across the room, can we start with Gary today, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Gary Weatherall from Shire Green Brightside Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alan Woodcock, Councillor for East Ecclesfield Ward.
Richard?
My name's Roger Davison and I'm Councillor for Ecclesfield.
Good afternoon. My name's Councillor Andrew Sanger. I'm Councillor for Forward Ward.
Councillor Bob McCann, Councillor for Baton Ward.
Thank you all.
Chair, I'm just saying that I'm a substitute member for Peter Garbett today.
Thank you, Bernard. Just coming to that. So my next item on the agenda is, Abby, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies today from Councillor Peter Garbett and Councillor Bernard Little substituting. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to know everybody's keeping me in check. Do we have any items for the exclusion of public or press, Abby? I don't believe we do on the general agenda.
No, that's it. No, today.
Okay, thank you. Does any member have any declarations of interest, please? I can't see anyone indicating, so I'll take that as a no. So minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting start on page 9, and I'll go through them for matters of accuracy and matters arising as we go through. So page 9, page 10, page 11. I can see no indications, so I'll take it that those are an accurate record. Thank you. And we're straight into site visits, and we will of course agree the sites that should be visited prior to the next meeting on the 22nd of March. The visit will be scheduled for the 21st as normal, so look out for an invitation from Abby for those. And the first item of business we have today is the tree preservation order number 446, 15 Brincliffe Gardens. Abby, do we have an officer who's... Oh, right, I'm sorry, Vanessa, of course, I'm not seeing you there. Over to you.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Lyons. I'm the tree officer that works with planning. I'm speaking today to seek confirmation of TPO number 446, which will protect 2 street trees located on the public highway outside of 15 Brincliffe Gardens, which is within Netheredge. The TPO was made on the 27th of October 2021, and the land on which the trees stand is within the Netheredge Conservation Area. So the trees are already protected to a limited extent by Section 211 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and this requires that notice is served upon the council before works to a tree can be carried out, and this gives the council the opportunity to make a tree preservation order where that's considered expedient. We did in fact receive notice of intention to remove the 2 highway lime trees, and that was on the 5th of October 2020. It's understood that this was to facilitate creation of a driveway which will cross the public footpath. Now, full planning permission has been granted for some development work to take place at number 15, and this is namely the demolition of outbuildings and erection of a 3-storey side extension to the house. But this specifically did not include permission to create a driveway. It was noted in the decision notice for the permission that the creation of a driveway does not require planning permission, and it was therefore removed from the description of the proposed development prior to the permission being granted. The said work could be carried out pursuant to existing permitted development rights, but the council's approval for how that work would affect the adjacent highway would be treated as a separate matter, which could potentially be approved under the provisions of the Highways Act 1980. However, it was advised within the decision notice that an application under the Highways Act for the vehicle access across the footway would be unlikely to be supported due to the damage it would cause to the adjacent highway trees. Therefore, upon receipt of the Section 211 notice to remove the trees, it was deemed expedient to serve a TPO to protect them. A condition inspection of the trees was carried out in September 2021 by 2 assessing officers at the time. A tree evaluation method for preservation orders was conducted by the officers, and they scored the trees with 16 points respectively, which indicates the trees as definitely meriting protection under a tree preservation order. I've since been to inspect the trees myself. My evaluation of the amenity value of the trees is discussed in full within the report. My conclusion is that the trees do merit protection, hence I'm here today to seek confirmation of the order. And we have received 1 objection to the making of the TPO, which again is detailed in full within the report.
Thank you, Vanessa. We have 2 speakers on this matter. We have a Mr. Bill Anderson and a Mr. Gary Grayson. Bill, as your name comes first alphabetically, I'll open the floor up to you. If you press there should be a little button with an illuminated speaking head on it for you to press. It might be quite hard to see you in the sunlight. Alan's coming to the rescue, don't worry.
That one, right,
Thank
sorry.
The floor is yours.
Hello. I served Section 211 notice about these 2 trees on account of that they were standing in the way of the proposed driveway that, as I understood it, would be necessary to instigate this or implement this planning permission. The Section 211 notice that I served was in October 2020, and it was rejected by the planning department, who said, as I didn't have permission to remove the trees, they couldn't accept the Section 211 notice. So I was somewhat surprised when a TPO arrived a year later. I was particularly surprised because the thing about a tree preservation order is it should be used to protect trees whose removal would have a significant negative impact on the environment and its enjoyment by the public. That's, I think, a direct quotation from the government guidance on tree preservation orders. And I don't think anybody could say that these trees stand out particularly. They are just 2 fairly normal street lime trees, and as the decision as to whether they're removed or not goes entirely down to, or in relation to this planning application, is entirely down to the Highways Department, I don't see that this tree preservation order was at all necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Gary, again, you should have a button that you can press to illuminate. The floor is yours.
Can everybody hear me? Is that okay? Yeah? Okay, I'm not here to do any negative damage to any part of Sheffield. I'm born and bred from Sheffield, and I'm a tree lover in that respect. I've brought along Bill, who's an esteemed arboriculturist, have I said that correctly? I just want to sort of put the human aspect to preserving these two trees. Now, they potentially are over 100 years old, or we're not sure. How long does a tree last? We're not sure. Is it worth the negative impact to our clients, to my clients? Now, my clients, he's a surgeon, he's a young surgeon, they're NHS workers, they've got electric cars, they can't charge them at home, obviously, because the trees are in the way of them getting access to their driveway. Now, I haven't done any calculations about what a tree's worth as opposed to the carbon saving of the electric vehicles, right? But I'd like everybody, the members here, to understand that I'm not here to harm trees per se. We're talking significant negative impact. Well, we're going to plant trees. We're going to plant 2 more trees or 3, and I can't. This meeting here is only for the TPO decision. I still have to go through conservation, I still have to go back to planning, I still have to get all necessary permissions. Dawn at Highways has already confirmed to me that she can't move without a decision being made with regards to these trees at this committee. However, Bill has assured me that she could make a decision because the trees don't stand in the way of the Highways issue. But I'm not going to unduly influence if the decision is made now to keep these 2 trees, then unfortunately my clients will not be able to charge their cars at home, and they won't be able to be all the carbon savings that they will be making with their electric vehicles. And they've just moved to town. Altaf and Fatima are lovely people. They've got very serious jobs. And what else have I got here? I haven't really got anything else to say, to be honest. Like I say, I'm all for the saving of the trees, but at what point does a tree stand in the way of our existence and moving forward to the future, 21st century electric vehicles? I think I've said everything I really need to say. Councillors, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grayson. Alan, if you take our visitors back to the waiting room, please, and we can then go back to the officer for any comments and open the floor up to questions. Vanessa, have you got anything you'd like to say in rebuttal or in defence of those comments?
I think my point really is just that in deciding whether a tree preservation order is necessary, we need to assess the amenity value of the tree and the expediency. And for me, it's quite straightforward in that these trees do offer significant amenity value to the area. They're a significant part of the conservation area. You know, the trees form part of an avenue in an area which is noted for its lime avenues. And the removal of those 2 trees, although the trees themselves, you know, you might say are just 2 trees, the removal of those trees makes the avenue less appealing as a whole. We've got historical photographic evidence that indicates Brincliffe Gardens was already tree-lined with young trees at a time when only 3 houses had been built there, which suggests to me that the street was created with the trees as an integral part of the street's plan. And it has been noted within the council's own conservation area documents that tree-lined streets are a feature of the Nether Edge area, and the same document makes reference to the degradation of these avenues through the creation of driveways. My assessment is that the amenity value of the trees is such that we should protect them, and the expediency is there because we've been served a section 211 notice to remove them. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. I've got Peter indicating.
Can you just clarify the current situation? Are cars crossing over the pavement going to the current properties? So there's no... Right. Is in your view, is it possible to make a crossover without taking the trees down?
My understanding would be that to create the vehicular access, which isn't already in existence, it would necessitate the removal of the 2 trees.
Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I shan't be supporting this, Chair. I just think a tree preservation order, you know, we're all understanding what they're there for, and this is not what they're there for. Absolutely not. You know, this is for a driveway to get cars off the road. You know what I mean? So we're not losing anything here, Chair. So I should be voting against this, Chair. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, then, oh, sorry, Bernard.
Yes, I'm a little disturbed to hear someone saying that these are just 2 normal trees. They're part of an... Sorry?
Sorry, Bernard, would you like to continue?
Yes. Yes, I was rather disturbed to hear them. They're just called 2 normal trees. As was said, that they do form a part of an avenue of rather beautiful looking trees, but they also provide a habitat for birds and insects. They take in carbon dioxide and give out oxygen, which is an enormously important gift that they provide us with. They provide shade in the summer when it's needed, and they help to mediate moisture in the soil and help reduce flooding, which is something that's going to happen more and more. I think that this is the proper use of the planning system to maintain a TPO on this tree. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Peter, Councillor Price, you wanted to come in with a comment? Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I mean, I find it's very difficult. I'm inclined to agree with Gary, really. I think the only thing that it saves is the vista of the street, because they're going to replace them with 3 more trees and then make access to get vehicles off the road to where they can be electrically charged, which means to be environmentally balanced somehow. And whether both trees have to come down to make a drive, I find very difficult to follow, because having a tree next to my drive, it's so easy. You know, I don't understand why they both have to come down. But I do find it difficult because 3 trees are going to be planted to replace the 2. And I accept it'll take years to reach that maturity. But looking at that, they are not too far away from having to be seriously looked at, as the original speaker said. So I'm finding it's very difficult to come to terms with, because normally I would support any TPO. But I think in this case, there is a genuine reason for us to question it, Chair.
Right, thank you for that. I've got Vanessa indicating, but I've got Vicky indicating first, and I'll bring her in. Well, sort it out amongst yourselves, I don't care.
One very brief thing to say. The trees have got at least 20 to 40 years of life left. You know, their potential as a future amenity is secure in my view. And trees may be planted to replace them, but you know, the avenue is consistent in its size and uniformity, which for me is part of its value, part of its amenity value.
Thank you, Vanessa. Right, Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, although the objector did refer to potentially replanting other trees, this is just a decision today whether to confirm the TPO. So although the objector said what they may or may not do, should there be a further application to actually carry out works, that's not really relevant for today's decision because they wouldn't be under any obligation to replant trees if you decide not to confirm the TPO. Because it is not the same in terms of a planning application where we'd be discussing the conditions that they've agreed to, etc. It is just whether the TPO is confirmed today that we're deciding. There's nothing going to be removed or replaced as a result of this decision. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Vicky. I've got Gary, Councillor Weatherall. You wanted to come back in with a comment?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's actually a question because after the officer spoke again about 20 years life left in that tree, and about the visitor of the alleyway, the course of the trees and everything else like that. Would you agree with me if the trees got blown down and got replaced by other trees? That would change the appearance, wouldn't it?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
If the trees got blown down or were in an accident by a lorry or something hitting them, you know what I mean, then it would have to be replaced, so the street scene would change, wouldn't it?
The street scene would change, but what we're being asked to do today is seek confirmation of the TPO as a result of an application being put in to fell the trees. So that is quite different really to the trees being removed by an accident or storm damage. And that's really what I'm addressing.
Your earlier question back to us, answer back to us was that you would find it difficult because it's over 20 years' time to have that tree in place, for the next 20 years. But then you were saying about, the change, the trees, the avenue would change. What I'm saying is to you, would it change if something happened to two trees and putting something else in its place?
The avenue would be changed if trees were removed, yes.
Thank you, Vanessa. But what we've been asked to do today is to confirm the tree preservation order on the trees outlined in the street outside 15 Brincliffe Gardens. And that is all we've been asked to do today. Yeah. Okay, I've got Richard wanting to indicate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you confirm if there are other TPOs on that road?
Vanessa?
With regards to privately owned trees or street trees? There are no other TPOs on the street trees there, no.
And just one point, I noticed if you go forward a slide, if you can, where the words run out at the top, well, not the top of the words running out, there appears to be a couple of newly planted trees. So that would give you an indication of what would the impact on the amenity and the visual amenity if you took these trees down. Thank you.
I can see no further indications of either questions or comments, so I propose to go to the vote. So the officer recommendation is to protect two trees of visual amenity to the locality. And the recommendation is that the tree preservation order number 446 should be confirmed unmodified. All those in favour of that application, actually, I think what I'll do, I'll go around the room individually and allow you to say whether you support or in favour of that recommendation or against. So I'll go to you first, Bernard.
I support this application to retain the tree with its TPO.
Brian?
I also support the officer's recommendation.
Chris?
Difficult one for the application, Chair.
Zahira?
For, Chair.
Thank you. Tony?
I agree with Chris, it is difficult, but I'm for the recommendation.
Peter?
difficult, against, yeah.
And if we go to Gary at the back, in the back corner.
Against, Chair. Disappointed.
Alan?
Difficult, but for the recommendation, Chair.
Richard?
Yeah, I will support the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Sorry, Roger.
Yes. On balance, I would support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, Andy?
Yes, Chairman, clearly it's a difficult issue, but on this one I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
And finally, Bob?
For the recommendation, Chair.
Abby, do we have an outcome? That recommendation is carried 11-4 to against. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vanessa. The next item on the agenda, we move into the application under various acts and regulations now, and we have 3 applications to consider today. The first one is application number 21/04810 FUL, land at the rear of 14 to 16 Oldfield Avenue on Oldfield Grove, Sheffield S6 6DR. And I believe this is your application, Sarah, if you'd like to present it to us.
Thank you. So if we go to the first slide, please. So this shows the red line boundary of the site. The site is accessed from Oldfield Grove, and it is formally part of the gardens of number 16, which is on the corner of Oldfield Grove and Oldfield Avenue, and number 14, which is the adjoining semi-detached property. This shows the aerial view. You can see that the area is predominantly, well, wholly residential dwellings with associated gardens and parking. This is an image which is looking down Oldfield Grove. To the right of the photograph, you can see the side of number 16 Oldfield Avenue. And the application site is where the green sort of hedges beyond that dwelling in the forefront of the picture. This is an image looking up Oldfield Grove. So to the left-hand side, you can see number 2 Oldfield Grove, and at the top of the picture you can see number 16, which is at the junction, and the application site is between those 2 properties. This is a view from within the site, looking up towards number 14 and 16. You can see that the site is predominantly grass, with some storage in there. There's a garage which is proposed to be removed, and a hedge. This is a similar view looking up towards Oldfield Avenue, but it shows in this picture you can see number 12 Oldfield Avenue, which is to the left-hand side of the picture, and along the left-hand side you can see a boundary fence, which would be the rear boundary of the application site and forms the boundary with number 12's garden. This is again taken from within the site, looking down towards number 2 Oldfield Grove, and again shows that the site is predominantly laid to grass. And this is an image looking over the back boundary into number 12 Oldfield Avenue's garden area. So this slide shows the layout and sections. Towards the bottom of the image there, outlined in red, you can see the site layout. So 3 detached dwellings are proposed, located towards the front of the site. They've each got 2 parking spaces up the sides of the houses, and then garden areas at the rear. The garden areas measure approximately 53 square metres, which is just in excess of the 50 square metres guidance that we have for garden sizes. And the sections towards the top of the page, the first one shows the section through the site taken from the front. So number 2 Oldfield Grove is to the left, and number 16 is to the right hand side. and that just shows the relationship with those dwellings. And then the section below that is taken from the rear of the site, and again shows the relationships with existing dwellings. This is the final slide, and this shows the elevations and the layout. You can see from that the main living accommodation is on the ground floor, and the upper floor is the bedroom. So there's 2 bedrooms at the front, and a small study and a bathroom towards the rear of the site. At the rear of the site, the only clearly glazed windows are at ground floor. The upper floors are, well, there's a dormer window that will be obscurely glazed because it serves a bathroom, and there's a Velux window which serves a study, and that's been designed that way to prevent overlooking of the site to the rear. And there's a short supplementary that's been published today. If you can just have a look at that. This relates predominantly to the officer report, which identifies that there was planning permission granted in 2018 for 2 dwellings on part of the site. So it's a smaller part of the site, which was just to the rear of number 16, and it was for 2 properties, whereas this application is for 3 properties but includes the land to the rear of number 14. The officer report states that the permission granted in 2018 has lapsed, but actually we've now had evidence which shows that foundations have been, or trenches have been dug, which means that the development has been implemented and it's now live, so that could be implemented going forwards. There's also one additional representation has been received, which raises issues about design, impact on street scene and overdevelopment, but they've all been addressed in the report.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Alan's already on his journey. You'll have to bear with him today because all the people who wish to speak to the meeting are down in the breakout area on the ground floor. So it's going to take him a little while to get down there and back. That's where the screen is set up. And we do have actually just the one speaker to this application. We're expecting Mr. Stuart Smallwood to come and talk to us, and he's in favour of the application. Mr. Smallwood, hello. Yes, please, if you take your seat there. You'll see in front of you there's a button which should have an illuminated speaking head on it. If you press that, you've got up to 5 minutes then to make your... on the bottom, if you press it again, you'll see the red light come on at the top. It's one of the silver buttons.
That one?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Is that right now?
That's it, Mr. Smallwood.
Right, okay.
We can hear you. I'm going to shut up and give the floor to you.
Right, good afternoon everyone. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. I'm Stuart, and I am the applicant for this scheme along with my wife. Myself and my family have lived in the area of Stannington for over 40 years. The project, if accepted, will provide dwellings for our family and will enable our son with ASD to remain in the village he was brought up in, with the added support of his family around him. I'd like to start by firstly thanking planning officers involved in their help and advice during this planning process. The building line. In 1990, the site was granted outline planning permission for a bungalow. Elevations showed this bungalow was just over 6 metres in depth and almost 21 metres wide, with front and rear door access and sited up against the common boundary to number 2 Oldfield Grove and forward of Oldfield Grove. This shows that the variation in the building line was accepted even back then. More recently, number 16 and 22 Oldfield Avenue at the top of Oldfield Grove have had side extensions which have again varied the building line. History. In 2017, we applied for pre-application advice for 3 detached bungalows, 17/02318/pre-app. We were advised there was insufficient amenity space to the rear of the gardens. However, a scheme for 2 smaller bungalows sited centrally on the plot with side gardens could be supported. In 2018, on the advice given, we submitted a scheme for 2 detached dormer bungalows, 18/03386/full, which was granted in 2019. In 2020, additional land to the rear, the lower garden area of 14 Oldfield Avenue, as just explained, was acquired. This garden area, 133 square metres, increases the site area by 38%. It was considered now that we had acquired the additional land and that the site could accommodate 3 detached buildings. In 2021, we submitted an application 21/02982/full. We felt this appropriate as it was of a lesser density than the approved 4 apartment scheme directly opposite on Oldfield Grove, which is on a site of approximately 350 square metres, substantially smaller than our proposed site of 475 square metres. Officers, however, had concerns regarding the scheme, so we set up a Teams meeting. Consequently, further designs and drafts were discussed to finalise acceptable details. Following this, we withdrew the application and resubmitted this latest one for 3 detached dormer bungalows. The summary of features and alterations are the reduction in quantity of the development from 4 down to 3, the reduction in overall size of the proposed units, alterations in design typology and materials to complement adjacent properties, increase in parking widths, dormer windows in traditional pitched roofscapes, and obscure glazing where appropriate, and Velux windows positioned 1.7 above finished floor level as previously stated. Summary of representations. Although a high number of objections have been received, 27 in total it states on the report, out of the original list of 10 notified neighbours by Sheffield City Council, only 6 have objected. The remaining 21 are not directly affected by this scheme. Indeed, 12 of these are from people as far away as Barnsley and Chesterfield. Summary. We have responded to 3 case officers over this application, their concerns and recommendations, and taken into account relevant neighbour objections in this planning process. We believe 3 modest bungalows would sit comfortably on this site and would not appear out of keeping within the street scene due to the very large frontage of over 33 metres. The bungalows will provide much needed housing in a popular, predominantly residential area and will appear much more aesthetically pleasing than the current overgrown privet edge and untidy, unused land. We hope that the councillors agree and can support the officer's recommendation to approve this planning application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smallwood.
Press this.
Yes, please, if you would. That's it. Sorted. Right. Yes, Alan will escort you out. Thank you very much. Sarah, would you like to respond to that? No, that's okay then. Do I have any members' questions? Andy?
Yes, Chair. I mean, is it possible on the diagram to explain the new land purchased and which bits from 14 and what was on the original? And can I say that I'm not convinced by the percentages because the way percentages work, page 51 and page 60 can't both be right. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so can you go back to the red line boundary, please, the first slide? Okay, it's quite faint on there, but so there's two dwellings on the junction of Oldfield Grove and Oldfield Avenue. The larger one on the corner is number 16, and the previous application site was directly to the rear of number 16. The additional land is that land to the rear of number 14, which is the adjoining property. So you can kind of see where it dog legs in towards the rear of those properties. That's the extra bit. And in terms of percentages, let me have a look at what you've referred to there.
Chair, just to clarify, I think it would be helpful to understand the original area and the new area and just do it that way. And I think as soon as you start talking about percentages, it does cause a problem because you can't go backwards and forwards. You've either got to say the new area and it's been added to a certain amount, or the combined area taking away a certain amount. And you've got to be clear what you're doing to get the percentage. And there's a lack of clarity.
Okay, thank you. So the application site covers an area of currently now of 475 square metres, of which 133 square metres is additional. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. So just in terms of the garden areas for each of the three proposed things, you say that it's you say on page 60 that it's in excess of 50 square metres on each of them. So what is the garden area for each of the proposed dwellings?
The garden area is 53 square metres for each of the dwellings.
Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions? Councillor Wetherall.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I got a little bit confused, but there again, that's not normal for me. When you said about back windows, and the windows are going to be obscure because they're overlooking. Well, on these maps that you've shown us today, how far is the back windows away from the new properties to the existing properties?
So if we go to the, we're going, aren't we? Thank you. So the distance between the rear elevation of the dwellings and the back garden boundary, it's splayed, so it varies between 4.5 metres, which is the house to the left, that's the shortest garden area, and 6.5 metres at the property to the right hand side. So that is smaller than we would recommend in terms of being an adequate distance for retaining privacy levels. And so in order to address that, the design of the dwelling is such that at ground floor level there are windows which will be clearly glazed, but the view out of them would be obscured by a boundary treatment, a sort of standard 2 metre high boundary treatment. And above that there are no windows which would provide an outlook across the site to the rear.
Thanks, Chair, that's cleared that up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Price.
Yes, Chair, I'm going to support the officer's recommendation. I think it's a good use of that land. 3 bungalows, it's better than the previous application for 4 dwellings. I think it's a bit tight, but on the whole, I think it's a good development, and I fully support it, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Little.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a concern. What is meant by sustainable location? Is this a sustainable location? I understand it's a planning term.
I believe that refers to its position in terms of it's within an existing housing area, and so it's accessible to existing facilities and amenities such as local shops and schools. People will be able to walk there, and that there is, I believe there's a high frequency bus route within close proximity as well.
In which case, why are we talking about 2 car spaces per property?
Well, we are providing parking spaces to ensure people have cars, and we want to make sure that they are parked within the curtilage of the site and they don't park on the road. So we have guidelines which sort of outline how many parking spaces should be provided, and this is in line with those.
With existing guidelines, this is what they suggest, two car spaces per dwelling.
Yeah, for a dwelling of this size, 2 car parking spaces is considered to be appropriate.
Right. My other question, well, I've got 2 other questions. Why is there no stipulation about it being a low carbon development? Later on, we're going to be looking at another development, which on page 79, for example, where there is, there is a discussion there about low carbon housing. Why isn't this being insisted here?
So that's not been proposed by the applicant, and there's no planning policies for developments of this scale that would require that to be undertaken. So for developments of 5 or more properties, we can require renewable energy, 10% renewable energy to be provided, but on developments of this scale, we don't have any policies to back that up.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is about, you discuss hedgehog-friendly at the site boundary treatment. What would that involve?
I believe that it's a fence that is designed to allow hedgehogs to pass through, so it might have like little passing places that are an appropriate size so that hedgehogs can go through them as opposed to being, and it maintains their sort of foraging grounds.
Right, and so for example, why not swift boxes as a recommendation?
I believe because the objections that were received made reference to foxes and hedgehogs using the site, and so that was put on to sort of mitigate for that.
But we couldn't recommend swift boxes in this location?
That hasn't been recommended. It wasn't considered to be necessary given sort of the biodiversity value of the site at present, which is mostly laid to grass and doesn't have a high biodiversity function. It could be put on if members consider that that was appropriate. We could add that on.
I'd like to suggest that. Thank you.
I'll second that, Chair.
I've got another couple of councillors indicating to speak. First of all, I've got Councillor Williams. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I went up and had a look at this site this morning, and I'm glad I did, because if you look at Oldfield Grove, it's a typical residential cul-de-sac. Virtually all the houses have got front gardens large enough to accommodate a car on the drive, including the flat directly opposite from this application site. Looking at the map, the footprint map, the new houses are going to be very, very close to the footpath. I'm estimating 1.5 meters from the footpath, maybe 2 meters maximum, which is totally out of character with the rest of the cul-de-sac. And I think, therefore, I cannot support this application, primarily because I believe it is overdevelopment, and goodness knows how they were going to get 4 houses on there. I can't imagine. The issue is the depth of the site. Quite a good clue is if we're on slide 15, which I think we are, if you look at the house immediately to the left, which I believe is number 2, Oldfield Grove, the depth to the back of that house is the same as the depth of the whole of the application site. And the only reason they've been able to get away with that is because they've moved all 3 new properties forward dramatically. I think it will upset the look of the cul-de-sac, and I think that's relevant, street scene as I used to call it. But I think it's just overdevelopment, and they could quite easily get two nice houses on that site. I think a third is too many. Thank you.
I also have Councillor Holmshaw indicating. Brian?
Thank you. I appreciate the importance of new housing for young people in outlying areas of Sheffield. But in terms of sort of quality of design, I'm not impressed by this building, sadly. There are two issues that particularly disturb me. One is the building line, just alluded to by Richard, Councillor Richard over there. And secondly, the design of the buildings themselves, which what the policy UDP H14 says in Sheffield, and which is largely connected to national guidelines as well, is that new buildings and extensions should be well designed and in scale and character with neighbouring buildings. And I find that these three buildings are not in character with the buildings around them. It's almost like no attempt has been made to try and coordinate. This is one of the examples where a very simple building design would fit in much better than a much more elaborate one, which is what they're going for here. So I'm afraid I cannot support this in respect of the building line, but also the design of the buildings, which I think is very poor in connection with what it could be.
Thank you. I've got a suggestion from Councillor Little on the floor, and I believe you want to speak to it, Councillor Otherall. Gary?
It's another question, actually, Chair, if you don't mind. But I'll support the recommendation what Councillor Little put forward. Interesting, speaking on the UDP 14 new properties, this is where we've got to be, Chair. We've got to encourage people to come forward in this city with properties and come and talk to our planning department, you know, and to bring these things forward. This is going to be 3 properties needed in Sheffield, Chair, so I should be voting for them. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. So we have a proposal that we, what was it? Add Swift boxes. Vicky, you wanted to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know regarding the comment about the boxes. Was that through a directive or a condition? It's just in terms of a condition, as I've said before, we need to meet those 6 tests, and one of those being whether it's necessary here. And I don't know whether you wanted to hear from the planning officer again about her opinion as to whether a condition would be necessary here, or whether a directive would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's very useful, Vicky. Sarah, do you have any opinion whether this proposal would fit the recommendations for a condition, or would a directive be more appropriate?
I think we could do it as a condition. But it would need to be worded as, because biodiversity, it would be a biodiversity enhancement, so a net gain, which is required by policy. So I think it can be considered to be necessary. So yes, I think a condition would be fine.
Do you want to come back, Vicky?
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask that members would vote on that motion, then, that I believe has been seconded, and that for the final word in condition to be delegated to the planning officer in conjunction with the co-chairs. Thank you.
I think that's appropriate. Are we happy to do this on a show of hands, or would that be adequate, Vicky? Yeah. Okay. So we have a proposal on the floor that we add a condition to enhance biodiversity through the addition of a Swift box, and the co-chairs will liaise with officers to get some appropriate wording for that. So all those in favour, could I see a hand? All those against? That's carried. Yeah. Okay. So I'll now move on to the. I take it. I haven't seen any more indication. I gave you too much of an opportunity there, Richard. Go on.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologise for not raising this earlier. Just in terms of the overdevelopment point I made earlier, I noticed in the officer's report that the density is approximately 63 dwelling houses per hectare, which is well above the 40 to 50 that we have in our guidelines or policy. It does, however, say that policy CS26, however, as described above, the policy does allow for densities outside the range set out in the policy in instances where they achieve good design and reflect the character of the area. in my view, good design is slightly a subjective thing, but I take Councillor Horshall's point. But certainly in terms of reflecting the character of the area, I'm pretty confident that these properties don't.
Thank you, Richard. I've been very indulgent. So, Vicky?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind members of the tilted balance that is actually mentioned in the report. And here, because we don't have the 5-year housing land supply, the National Planning Policy Framework, which is a material consideration, does tell us that we should be granting permission unless, and in this case, whether any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policy and the framework as a whole. So it's just to remind members about the tilted balance there. Thank you.
And with the tilted balance ringing loudly in our ears, I propose to move to the vote. So the officer recommendation is to grant conditionally. So with the conditions and the amended condition that we've just voted on included, I'll go around the room and ask for your vote whether you're in favour of the officer recommendation. Councillor Little.
I'm in favour of the development with the recommendations, yes.
Councillor Holmeshaw.
Yes, just for clarity, because of the excess density of the lack of appropriate design, but also of the planning line, I am not in favour of the application.
Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
For the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
For, Chair.
Councillor Downs.
For, Chair.
Councillor Price.
Support the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Weatherall.
For, Chair.
And going on round the room, we have Councillor Woodcock.
For, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Sanger. I'm sorry, Roger, I've just completely bypassed you. Normally, before I've opened my mouth, you've spoken. I do apologise.
It's okay. Don't worry. For, Chair.
Councillor Sanger.
Against, Chair, I think it's an overdevelopment of the site.
And Councillor McCann.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Vicky, do we have a decision on that? Oh, sorry. That's my fault. Do you want me to just go around the last few votes again, or are you okay? Right, so that's carried with 9 votes for and 3 against. Thank you very much. Right, I'll try and be professional and get the next one right and not overindulgent. So thank you for that, Sarah. We now come to application number 21/02633 FUL, and it's for premises at 322 Abbeydale Road. And Chris, would you like to present the application to us, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is a site on Abbeydale Road, an existing shop unit, previous shop unit, which has been used as a shop and cafe, and the cafe has an alcohol licence for approximately, I'm not quite sure, but approximately 18 months or so. And through the pandemic, like many properties up and down Abbeydale Road, which I'll touch on in a moment, they added an external seating area with a covered shelter, which over time was added to, I presume with changes in the weather, to create an enclosed shelter. There are, members will probably be aware, there are many of those structures up and down Abbeydale Road in particular, and some other parts of the city, but particularly Abbeydale Road has a concentration of them that are of varying quality, most of which aren't authorised, but that's because of the speed at which they had to get the facilities up and running to maintain their businesses. and we are now beginning to get on top of those, for want of a better expression, in enforcement terms, regularising the ones that are acceptable, seeking improvements or taking action to others that aren't. So this application was submitted midway through all that process. And you'll see in the report reference to a bar within the facility. We had a long discussion with the applicant about this, who verified that the bar isn't a key part of the business. It's essentially a cafe and a shop, and they do have a drinks licence. So the bar was actually removed from the description of the application, which meant that the property didn't need permission for a change of use at all, and the application was then left with the issue of the unauthorised shelter. So if you wouldn't mind moving down one or two of the slides, please. So that's the shelter there. It sits on the side of the property. That picture is taken from Frederick Road, which is a residential street with a curb at the end that doesn't allow access onto Aberdale Road. It's probably worth just flicking through the images a few seconds at a time, if you don't mind, please. So you'll see there that there are some planters in front. They're actually on the public highway, and obviously there'd be highways controls that could seek the removal of those. But they were at one point, as you'll see from some later images, inside the what I'll call building. It's essentially a timber frame that's been infilled with sort of perspex panels and what have you. So that's the view from Aberdale Road. You can see just to the left there the shop front, which is where the main entrance is. There's no direct link between the structure and the shop unit, other than for staff who are coming in and out of the kitchen that does link into there. Thank you. That's obviously another image showing it in its wider context. And that is how it appeared originally before it was filled in. And you can see there that the planted screens are actually providing a screen between the seating areas. And I think that's just about the last one, that may be the last one actually. So in policy terms, just for reference really, the site falls within a shopping area. So the shopping frontage along Chesterfield Road is within the shopping area. And then immediately to the back you can just see the houses there behind. It falls within the housing area. It's a prominent corner location on a busy arterial route. And our view is that it's a significant structure of a kind of an uncoordinated temporary appearance. And we feel that we can't support it as a long-term feature. I'll come on to that a little bit later, but there is potential for noise and disturbance within it when there are a number of people active within it, but we have recommended a limit on hours of use, which we feel resolves that concern. Although there's a lot of support for it, there's also quite a number of objections from neighbouring residents on those grounds. So our view overall was that as it stands, the shelter shouldn't be a permanent feature. However, given the current climate and the need for the business to be able to respond positively to any decision, consider options, etc. We felt it was appropriate to allow it to remain for a period of 18 months. 18 months is consistent with one or two other decisions we've made recently in the area that allows the business, we think, some time to take stock and decide how they want to approach it, either to pursue a more permanent structure or possibly even alternative premises if the premises are too small without it. If we just draw members' attention to the supplementary report, there's a bit to refer to here. There's a report correction. It's not critical to the recommendation at all, but the report on page 67 referred to legislation concerning temporary structures that some members might have recalled, where the government, as a COVID response, allowed for temporary structures outside pubs, bars, cafes, restaurants. to enable social distancing for the hospitality industry. The report said that that had been extended for a further year. That's incorrect. It hasn't. It's been made permanent, but there are some significant limitations on it. And just for clarity, this particular structure wouldn't be permitted development. It does need planning permission. The regulations refer to movable structure and is aimed largely at marquees in the grounds of properties. There are amendments to the conditions in that the red line plan, some members may have spotted from the information within the pack and also on the images, the red line plan didn't extend to the area of the structure. So we've had to correct that in order to make a correct decision. That's been done. So it's just that the drawing reference within condition 2 needs updating. So that's what that is there. Conditions 3 and 4, if you wouldn't mind, if you just, sorry, go back a bit to one of the next one, I think. Yeah, if you stay there. So that image there, you see there's those 2 doors there and another one further down. They were opening over the highway, so condition 3 was addressing a time limit for them to change that. And number 4 was referring to rainwater running off onto the highway. Both of those have actually been carried out on site, so there's no need for those conditions anymore. So we're recommending that they're deleted. And that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You'll have to bear with us now for just a couple of minutes for Alan to, I'm trying to pace my talking out so that Alan's got a good feral chance to get down to the room where the observers are sitting. We have one speaker to this application, Nicole Jowett, and I believe she's the applicant. We've got her down as speaking for the application. So she will be coming and talking to us fairly shortly. Good afternoon, Nicola. Thank you for coming and talking to us today. If you make yourself comfortable, you'll see on the silver bar at the bottom of your microphone set there's a little speaking head. So if you press that button, you've got 5 minutes to make your point, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Coles Corner opened just 3 months before the first lockdown came. We had to work extremely hard and be innovative in order to keep the business afloat, and a crucial part of our relative success has been the use of this outdoor space. The undercover terrace, as we call it, was constructed in June 2020 in line with government recommendations. The space has proved incredibly versatile, and we've modified it many times over the course of the last 19 months, as you will see from the photos. We used our own funds along with a bounce-back loan and grants to pay for the construction of the terrace, including the planters, which are, as you can see, not fixed and can be used to set the space up in different ways. The crucial ventilated space has enabled us to host socially distanced cafe seating during the pandemic, and also art exhibitions, community group meetings, live music events and pop-up food events. Changes have been made to comply with the guidelines as the pandemic situation unfolded, and more recently to make the space viable for use in the less inclement months. The planning report mentioned complaints regarding music. These were received last August after the Sheffield Music Trail. There were no complaints before that, from July 2020 until August 2021, and there haven't been any other complaints since then. The event in question was part of a citywide initiative funded by the City Council. Unfortunately, the neighbour had been informed, but later admitted that they'd forgotten that we told them about it. So when a lot of people turned up on the day, they were a little bit surprised. And that resulted in some noise complaints. As noted by Chris, the plastic sheeting which we've put more recently has actually given so much soundproofing that the neighbour tells me she doesn't know whether we're open or not. The same neighbour also remembers what the street was like before we built on the side. It was a well-known hotspot for antisocial behaviour. The police were regularly called to deal with large groups of gangs and gathering, which was frightening for residents, and there was regular evidence of drug paraphernalia across the streets. We believe that Coles Corner is a part of Abbeydale Road's exciting, vibrant and eclectic offering. It's something that we hear from our customers all the time. And despite the pandemic, the area which is most exclusively made up of independents like ourselves continues to thrive. The construction, which the planning officer described as poorly designed, gets much praise from people who regularly stop to tell us how attractive they think it is, and the low quality materials that the planner described are what we would describe as sustainable. Lots of items have been recycled and repurposed in order to keep in keeping with the ethos of the business. We're one of more than 24 businesses on Abbeydale Road who have what the planning department refer to as unauthorised structures. We are, however, one of less than a handful who are at the stage of an official planning application, as compelled by the planning department. This is due to a series of incorrect advice we've been given. We constantly argued that we were a licensed cafe, but we were being forced down the line of being sui generis, which is a class that's usually reserved for petrol filling stations, casinos and amusement centres. This application has cost us a lot of time, money and stress, something we can ill afford in the current situation. The proposed 18-month time limit would certainly come before we've been able to see a return on the investment and would be extremely damaging to our business. Also the request that we would not be allowed to play any music would be really damaging to the business. We are a record shop cafe and the music is a key part of our offering. When we've used decibel readings, we've kept it within the COVID guidelines of under 65 decibels. And just to note that the traffic on Abbeydale Road, if you read that, is always above 70 decibels. So actually the music's just to drown out the traffic more than anything else. We hope that the committee will see fit to allow us a permanent permission for this structure, a well-loved and well-used terraced area. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Alan, would you like to escort Nicola back down to the viewing area? Chris, would you like to come back on any of those points that have been made?
Yes, I will, Chair. I was just double checking a reference within the report, actually, before I did that. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's much that's been said there that I really need to respond to. Obviously, the lady was explaining the importance of the facility to the business, etc. And she referred to the being one of 24. By that, I think she meant that's a reference to the other structures I was referring to in my opening comments up and down Abbeydale Road that we're slowly working through with those businesses. I think the one thing I did just want to comment on was there was a reference to the use in the sui generis class. There is sui generis isn't a class as such, because what that means is it's a use on its own. But in any event, what we're dealing with here is purely the structure itself, not the use of the building, as I explained at the beginning. The one thing that I was just checking there, Chair, was the reference to not playing music. I believe that was a reference to condition 6, which says no loudspeakers fixed within or externally to the extension or directed to broadcast sound inside the extension at any time. So what that's saying is that any music that's played within the venue should be contained within the building itself and not played through loudspeakers in that external space. And that's following recommendation from environmental health officers, environmental protection officers, should I say, in respect of proximity to neighbours, including the flat above and flat above other shops nearby. So I think the main point was the final point, which is that they would like the facility to remain permanent. And I'd just refer back to my earlier comments that we don't feel that that's appropriate in terms of the appearance of the structure on a permanent basis. We're happy for it to remain for a short term whilst to give the business time to work through alternatives with us. But as a long-term solution, we don't feel it's an appropriate measure.
Thank you, Chris. I'll now open the floor to members' questions, and the first indication I've got is from Councillor Humshaw. Brian.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, you mentioned about the applicant thinking this ought to perhaps be permanent. Is there a way within our decision-making today that, if we chose to, could be a way forward? Or are we talking about refusal or an 18-month extension?
Chair, the condition number 1 requires the structure to... sorry, I'll start from a different perspective. The application is to retain the timber structure. We're recommending approval of that, but with a number of conditions, including condition 1, which is the condition that says it shall be removed on or before the 30th of September 2023, which is the 18-month period. So if members wanted to approve it on a permanent basis, I'd suggest the way to do that would be to delete that condition, and then it would have no time limit.
Okay. Do you want to come back, Brian?
It's just whether there's been any negotiation, because Nicole has mentioned about being able to build up enough finances to be able to make that permanent change in that 18-month period.
There has been negotiation insofar as we've had a discussion, we've explained why we're not happy to keep it on a permanent basis. One option was there were 2 options open to us as officers. One was to present a recommendation for refusal, but we felt that this was an appropriate, not so much compromise, but an appropriate position to allow the structure to remain and the business to continue for a while they continued alternatives. So we didn't negotiate in terms of kind of almost horse trading about timescales, but we explained why we didn't feel we could recommend it permanently, and the applicant expressed their view, but we had to make a recommendation at the end of the day, and this is it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Naz Zahira.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to know, how long has this timber structure been in place? Do we know? I'm assuming there wasn't any planning permission applied before that went up.
Chair, there wasn't permission applied for, but I think, to be fair to the applicant, as I said at the beginning, a number of businesses with tacit approval of the government and the council were erecting temporary structures to see them through the pandemic, and as authorities countrywide, we were advised to go easy on enforcement through that period. So it didn't have any kind of permission previously. How long has it been up? I think the pandemic is 2 years in now. I think it's been up in the order of 20 months, 21 months, something of that nature. I can't be certain on that, Chair.
Is that okay, Zahira? Yeah, okay. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Sanger. Andy.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, Aberdale Road has clearly got a vibrant multicultural character, and clearly the cafes that have stayed open in COVID have sort of worked with that environment. So what sort of materials would you like to see a permanent extension if you're saying that these lightweight polycarbonate sheeting and tarpaulin and timber slats are not appropriate on Aberdale Road? What would you like to see a permanent extension look like?
That is quite a difficult question to answer because there's such a range of structures that have been erected along Aberdale Road that we're going through each one with each business, and sometimes the answer is slightly different because of the nature of that business, its location, what they've got there already, and often wanting to adapt it. I don't think we don't have an objection to the use of timber necessarily, as long as it's done well. And I would say, without kind of going too far on this one in terms of what we'd like to see, that the image that's up there now, I think there's quite a big difference between the image that's up there now and the one on the screen now, sorry, compared to how it looks now, because the appearance now is very much more kind of uncoordinated. The previous image, where it's open admittedly and doesn't solve some of the concerns of the business, is more of a kind of almost like a pergola structure just attached to the side, which is open and light, whereas this has been infilled with several different types of panels. As I say, it's not particularly coordinated. So I'm not really answering your question there to say exactly what I would like to see, but I think a simpler, cleaner, higher quality design would be our view. Whether that's enclosed or open is open to discussion.
Thanks for that. I mean, it was clear from the site visit that they were clearly going for a Caribbean vibe in terms of the setting of the record shop, and this lean-to structure was very much of that, and clearly that's not the historic nature of Aberdale Road, but it is the future of Aberdale Road in terms of the multicultural and people going for different colours, and different buildings having different uses. I'm still struggling with this sense that timber is okay, but it's the tarpaulin sheeting and it's the way it's the way it's been filled out that's not quite right. I'm still confused in terms of how we're going to give clear advice to these people about what would be acceptable and unacceptable. We need to give them a range of options, but at the moment I don't feel we're giving them enough clear guidance in terms of what can be done in the next 18 months.
And that's something that will come out in the process, if I'm honest, and something that is starting with the other businesses as well, and what we're saying about timber is that you'll see some of them, and without naming properties, some of them are just very crudely knocked together in a matter of minutes, some of them, and some of them are quite well constructed in good quality materials. So the response will be different on a case-by-case basis. And yes, we won't be saying you must have one particular kind of approach, to pick up the point about the sort of eclectic nature. There will be a difference, and it will be down to the applicant largely. And in some areas, some people are happy with just a low-level screen, which of itself doesn't need permission. So and therefore we've got no control over what it's made out of. So there will be a considerable variety within the street scene still, resulting from that. But I can't say specifically here and now, we want this particular one to look like this.
Thanks, Chair.
Chair, can I seek your advice? I want to move an amendment to the recommendation. Do you want to do it after questions or?
I think I'd very much like to hear the debate, so I'd like you to hang on to it and move after the questions, because things might become clear through that. The next speaker I've got indicating is Councillor Weatherall. Gary?
Thanks, Chair, for that. Well, I'm going to be supporting this, Chair, and the reasons is that and a couple of questions in here as well. you know, great. I mean, Andy's said it all, really, it's all changing, and it's changing for best of the city, because in the lockdown, you know, people want to go out still, and this is a fantastic place. You know what I mean? And this has happened, it's evolved, and now if it comes back later on with a different application, help and support with officers as well. But I'm just struggling a little bit. Every place I go to, and they're outside events I go to, and this one in Peace Gardens, you know, when we have the tent and everything up here, outside, you know, they've got music outside on speakers, and that's where I'm struggling. When you say no speakers outside, no music, I mean, the applicant were better than I am. I'm going to mention decibels and whatever, but I'm sure we could have some kind of limit for the outsides, you know what I mean? The inside has got a limit, and I wonder if we can have a different limit for the speakers outside. I know you say no speakers at all outside, but I just wondered if we can have speakers outside, if we can change it, put an amendment in. Thanks for rambling, Chair.
Chair, I'm not a noise expert, and we've taken advice from Environmental Protection on this. I don't know how easy it is to, in a climate like that, next to a busy road, to specifically measure noise within a structure of that nature. Within a building, it's okay, you can seal everything else off. So I'm not quite sure whether any noise limit that was to be set, and I wouldn't be able to say what that should be, would be enforceable for those reasons, because I'm not sure how we would easily monitor it. You can have equipment that has noise limiters on them, for example, which might be an option, but that was explored with the Environmental Health Officer before the recommendation was made, and it was felt that it wasn't possible to achieve something that would be helpful to the applicant in terms of being a clear figure, and that would be enforceable. But as I say, I'm not a noise expert, Chair, so it's difficult for me to say what any kind of figure might be that wouldn't cause harm. I think the issue, the things like the Peace Gardens, they're a public space, they're created for events. This is within about 10 metres of residential property on the other side of Frederick Street Road, and has a flat directly above. So we feel that the noise climate is quite important there, although recognising that this is on Aberdale Road where there is obviously a degree of traffic noise.
Has that answered your question? Thank you. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Price. Pete, was this to move your amendment or was it to ask a question? Right. Can I come back to you at the end then, at the end of the questions? So in that case, the next speaker I've got is Councillor Williams. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. If you go to slide 25, please, I think it's the next one. Would that structure need planning permission?
Yes, it would, Chair.
Thank you. And the second question is 18 months the maximum time you can allow for a temporary permission?
No, Chair. 18 months is a figure that we felt was. I mean, there's always a difficulty with temporary permissions because if you go too long, it's almost tantamount to being permanent. And in this case, going too short would have caused some immediate concerns for the business. So we thought that 18 months was an appropriate limit. But temporary is almost anything that's not permanent. So it could be a longer period, could be a shorter period. But as I say, we would always bear in mind whether for 3 years, 4 years or something is tantamount to it being permanent anyway, and almost what's the point in doing that? So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, the next speaker I've got is Councillor Davison. Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I've had my question answered. I'd like to change it to a comment, if I may. So if I can put me down for comments, please.
I will. I'll put you down for comments, and I appreciate that. The next God, I've got so many people here that I'm moving across and putting on different lists. The next speaker I've got is Councillor McCann. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Chris, on the conditions, it says the extension shall not be used by customers during certain hours. Does that include people standing on the footpath outside? Because in these photos that were sent through, there's clearly a crowd of people standing on the footpath outside. So is that governed, does that condition cover that situation?
I haven't seen those photos, Chair, so I'll take Councillor McCann's word for that. But no, the condition only relates to land within the red line, which is up to the back edge of the footway.
So how do we control people standing on the outside drinking? Is that...
I think, Chair, that consuming alcohol on the footpath is a different matter outside planning control. Obviously, it would result from this use, but I'm not quite sure of the answer to that, Chair. How we control that on the footway?
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a licensing issue rather than a planning matter. Yeah. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Little.
Yes, I very much appreciated Nicola's presentation. I really like the look of the building and what she's done with her business. I think it's very much to be encouraged. I'd be very saddened to see the business fail or suffer because of any condition we put on it. I do agree that it needs to be upgraded, as it were, so it's a more sort of well thought through structure, as it were, and stronger. But the issue about noise or sound that Nicola brought up, I thought was very clear. It was very clear that the decibels coming from the street are 70 decibels from the noise from the traffic, and the decibels coming from her speakers was 60 decibels. So it seems a bit sort of incongruous to insist that the sound of the music coming from the speakers is actually lower than the coming from the street, from the cars. So I would have no objection there to be speakers outside, providing that the music is stopped at 9 o'clock in the evening. And it appears that there's been no adverse reaction from these changes from the people, the residents in the surrounding areas. She made the point that several of the events that have caused the disturbance were a result of festivals going on in the city, and that one of them had been approved by this council as a result of us celebrating the music and vitality of the city. So I think I don't think that should dissuade us from approving a speaker outside.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Little. I couldn't find a question in there, so I'm going to pass straight on to Councillor Humshaw. Brian. Vicky, you wanted to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I understand that members obviously listened to the objector, and she's made some comments in respect to decibel levels, but I'm not aware whether Chris could provide us with any information he's got regarding decibel levels in respect to the traffic, for example, if members are minded to take that sort of information into account. Thank you.
Chris?
Chair, I was going to add something similar, that I'm not disputing what's been said, but I can't verify that either in terms of the noise levels. And that's the point I was making earlier. It's difficult to quantify as well when you're in an outdoor environment what necessarily is triggering the noise. I think all I would say, and I don't want to complicate this at all, is if members were of the view that they wanted music to be, in other words, if they disagreed with the black and white nature of Condition 6, then it might be possible to word some, for want of a better expression, watering down of that allowed some music to be played up to a certain level. But for the reasons I said earlier, I can't sit here and tell you that I'm convinced that will work and will be enforceable without referring reference back to environmental protection colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay for you? Becky, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. Based on what Chris said then, I don't know whether members may want to consider deferring the matter for things to be looked at again, or whether Chris thinks the answer he's got currently from environmental protection is definitive, or whether a deferral might enable some exploration of that, if that's something that members wanted to pursue. Thank you.
So that's a suggestion from Vicky. Was it a question that you had, Brian, or do I? Right, I'll take your question. Then I'll go to Pete for his proposal.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to come back to Chris again, following up from probably my first question, which was to do with the length of time, and it may be where we're going with, I don't know where Peter might go there with his proposal, in connection with giving an extended amount of time to the property. The question is, do you have a design template for the area in place, or not? Because there are 24 properties here that are potentially being affected.
No, Chairman, that's a similar question to, or the answer is similar to the answer to Councillor Sangar's question, that we don't have a specific template, and everyone is different. They're different in terms of the position as well. This one's is for instance on a side street, so in some respects is less prominent, although at the same time relates more to a residential area. And there are others on very kind of strong defined stretches of Aberdale Road that would be quite a significant introduction to that street scene if they were large and solid. So on a case-by-case basis, we'll be looking for some to possibly be a little more lightweight than others. Some are up near the picture house, for example, which is listed building. So there are different considerations in all cases. So the simple answer is no, there isn't one template. I think what we will be looking for on the whole is something that's of reasonable quality and of more lightweight appearance, that doesn't have so many solid features. For example, one up near the picture house most recently, members may be familiar with it, has been refused permission and is going through the process of enforcement because there was nothing we could do with that. It was either okay or it wasn't.
Right, thank you. It very much looks like you've got your work cut out over the next few months. I have had one more indication from Gary, but was that a question, Gary? Was it a comment or was it a proposal? Because if it is, I'm going to Pete first.
If the coffee shop, record shop, cafe bar had an app inside and the people came outside who sat down and they logged on to that app and played music at their table, you know, would that be?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Chair.
It's about this music going up. If people's got iPhones and there's an app inside the shop and they're playing records, and I'm sat outside, I log on to the app, what's inside, and they're playing music, and I'm downloading that music, I'm playing it outside. Well, that's just extra music. It's just going, I'll skip this question then. This is looking a bit gone to me now, Chris. I'm going to leave it because it's just going back to that audio one, but I think Pete's going to touch on.
Right, thank you for that, Gary, because I don't see that there was any way we could have could have answered that today without deferring and getting some more advice from my colleagues in environmental protection. I'm going to hand over to you, Peter. You've waited very, very patiently.
And I'm not chunted. This debate reminds me of many, many years ago when we had the massive debates about cafes being allowed to put their tables outside for customers could be enticed. There's a similar argument. Because I disagree with Chris on this one. See, I think Aberdale Road is a unique road. It's got a massive variety of independent shops who are constantly coming and going, and it adds to that. And I think we ought to be proud of Aberdale Road and the way it works. And I think this Coles Corner has added that variety and vibrancy. And I think it needs longer than 18 months. The very nature of this type of facility, they come and go, the cafes, they go through a popular stage, then gradually die, and something else comes along. And I think it would be wrong as planners to put a rule in that would restrict its life, really, for 18 months. I think it's proving very popular in the area, and I think she's quite right that the noise was down to a particular city centre event, which everybody did. Don't forget we have marathons up where all crowds come. It's a noisy road, one of the noisiest roads in this city. And I think this cafe adds to that vibrancy, adds to the colour and adds to the attraction. And I would agree, I would think that it's not necessary to put an 18-month limit on the plan application. I think in 5-10 years' time, it will gradually, something else will take on that attraction down the street. And it encourages that independence, and I think it's something we ought to be proud of. And I'd like to move that we grant approval, not on a temporary basis, that's all, and it gets on with the job of entertaining people in that area and people of Sheffield, because I think it's one of the best on Aberdale Road, and it would be a shame to lose it, Chair. So I want to move that we do give it approval, but on a permanent basis, and if possible, allow music up to, I don't know, 9 or 10 o'clock like we do in other areas, because I think it's something we ought to encourage and treasure.
Right, so we seem to have two proposals there. First you looking at removing the condition 1, and the second you're looking to remove the condition with regards to condition 6 with regards to loudspeakers. But I think we've been advised already that if we want to do that without any advice from colleagues in environmental health, we should defer. I've got a number of speakers that I'm willing to permit, and we'll see how this plays out. So first of all, I'm going to... Oh, you can most certainly, Chris.
Just to clarify before you open that discussion up, I think what we were saying in terms of the needing additional advice from environmental protection was if we were to be varying the condition to put specific references about decibel levels or whatever into that condition, then that's what would need referral. I couldn't suddenly pluck a figure out of the air or even say whether it's measurable, particularly in this context. If, however, the way I understood Councillor Price's point was to allow for remove the temporary condition, i.e. condition 1, so in other words that would be granting permission for it on a permanent basis, and then also to allow noise to be played up till 9 o'clock, and if that's the case then it would be deleting condition 6 as well. That's the way I understood it.
Vicky, I'm going to come across to you for a legal opinion before we let this debate roll on a little bit.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that you've potentially got members moving to either remove the temporary nature of the permission, and then you've also got the other question about the noise aspect. I think members, in terms of the noise aspect, you haven't got that advice currently from environmental protection, which I think is something that would be useful for members to have knowledge, because as I say, the objector did make reference to decibel levels and obviously considers that herself to be relevant. So I think that information would be useful for members if they were minded to explore alternatives with that condition. And in respect of the temporary nature of the permission, I think what I noted was that some members has referred to this particular business, but what members may need to be mindful of is that making this a permanent structure would mean that any business could come forward and take advantage of that shelter. It wouldn't be personal to the current proprietor as the application currently stands. Thank you.
Okay, so that leaves them in a very different position, doesn't it? I'm willing to listen to speakers, and I hope we will move to a consensus. I've got Councillor Dams. Tony, you wanted to speak on this.
Yeah, I agree with everything Peter said, right up to the point when he said make it permanent. I think 18 months is a reasonable amount of time. And if there's going to be any problems, we'll be able to identify them. If they're not ironed out, then we might want to make another decision. But I do think it's an addition to Abbeydale Road, and I do think it adds to the vibrancy of it. But I think 18 months is a reasonable amount of time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Davison. Roger.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I think that one of the great advantages of having a site visit is that you see things from perhaps a different angle than you might otherwise see in a photograph. And it looked, for me, a lot better when I saw it from the ground, as it were, on a site visit, than looking at these photographs. It's a very quirky business, and it's one that, well, obviously people want to make it work, and these are difficult times for these operatives. I think also we've got to take into account the fact that on at least 2 occasions, or 2 recommendations that the planners asked for, she complied with, and one was the drain off, and one was I think was the music, wasn't it? The sound, but that could change, and I'm not against this. I think it's a good idea actually referring it to the environmental department on that one. I think that there was a very interesting improvement if you look at the the old photographs and look at the extension. It is a hodgepodge, is Abbeydale Road. Yeah, 25 is an interesting one. I think developed from 20. That's picture number 25, the chain. It's an interesting development from picture 25 to the present day, where they're making sure that people are, let's say, helped from the cold and, safe from the elements. So, while I agree with what Peter is saying, I would just hesitate at making it a permanent one. I think certainly it seems from what Chris Healy has said that it's a flexible 18 months, and so I would go along with that. I know that sometimes it takes longer for a payback, and whether a more permanent structure will happen will depend on whether they own the business or whether they're leasing it. So, but in the meantime, I think we'll. I'd like to agree to the current situation of 18 months, and I'd be happy about the music element being reviewed. Thank you.
Chair, can I just clarify? Because we're not talking about reviewing it in 18 months. We're talking about demolishing it in 18 months. That's the decision. So there's no argument. We can't come back and look at it again. The structure shall be removed on or before the 30th of September. If it's just said we review it, that's different. But we're not. We're going to knock it down and leave back to square one. That's what I'm against.
Right. I've also got Councillor Williams. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with virtually everything Peter said, but I also agree with what Councillor Dan said as well. I'd be reluctant to go for a permanent permission, bearing in mind this is on the edge of a housing area, and I'd like to see that run out and see whether It's hearsay about how, problems with the neighbours. But the business is good and it needs supporting. So if we can, and I take on board your comments, Chris, about when does it become a permanent anyway, can we extend the temporary permission possibly up to 3 years? I mean, I've run businesses, and 18 months in business isn't a very long time to see how it's going. So my suggestion would be to extend it to 3 years.
Right, thank you for that, Councillor. Right, so we have 3 proposals on the table now, none of them which currently have been seconded. I have you, Gary, but my next speaker is Councillor Andy.
Thank you, Chair. And I mean, I think I have a lot of sympathy with Councillor Peter Price's suggestion that this is a vibrant business. Aberdale Road is different to other places, and we need to do what we can to support this particular business. But that's not how planning works. And I feel what the officers have tried to do is they've tried to bring a report that is the first of several that might come before us in terms of temporary structures on Aberdale Road and other places, and try to regularise the situation following, the unprecedented last 2 years we've been through, which has been really difficult for the hospitality sector. So I do feel for the officers in this case. And what's happened to this report is that we've already lost condition 3 and 4. We found that we don't have sufficient data to have a position on condition 6, and we're now debating whether condition 1 should be 18 months, 36 months, or forever. I really think in these circumstances, Chair, the best thing is to defer, because that way we can get a proper report on the noise situation, which most of the objections were about the noise. This is a record shop. They're going to want to play music. So I think we need to have some figures on the noise in terms of how much noise comes when you play music versus the traffic, and try to understand whether we can put in some condition that understands how loud that is and how frequent that is, and what time of the evening that should stop. So I think we need that so we can get a regular position in terms of condition 6, and therefore I think we need to defer it. I think that would give us sufficient time to address the issue around condition 1, because most of us want to support this business, but we are concerned, as Councillor Williams has said, that 18 months when you're an independent, when it's just a small group of people running it's not a very long time. So I think deferring it would give us the chance to think through whether there are other options other than 18 months in terms of how long this temporary structure should be there before it either comes down or is replaced by a more permanent structure. So I would move that we defer this. Thanks, Chair.
Right, so I've got a proposal on the floor now to defer. I've got Brian, are you wanting to talk to? Yeah, talk to that then.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Andrew. I think we're getting some really concrete proposals here, but we have to make some decisions. And I would actually support that. It would give us an opportunity to look at the 18 months and maybe move it on to 2.5 years, referring back to Richard over in the corner there, Councillor Richard. But also that it allows the planning department to put in place a design template for the area and can start to work that up with other equivalent structures in the area. So a deferral would be what I would support you on that.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Right, we've got a proposal that has been seconded to defer. That's Vicky, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think if you wanted to move to now vote on that deferral, for those, I think there's 2 main reasons, isn't there? It's about the referral to environmental protection regarding what else can be looked at in respect of the noise issues and that condition, and also for the temporary nature of the permission and the timescales to be reconsidered by officers, and whether they're going to want to look at bringing forward a different condition should it come back to committee.
Right, thank you for that, Vicky. I did have two other councillors. Was it making new points, or were you speaking to this deferral, the proposal to deferral? I've got Bob and Gary, and I'm only going to take speaking to the deferral now. Bob?
Well,
Gary?
Well, if you're going for that, then I'm going to have to put one into, you know, to stop it then, Chair, because, you know, it's not, I don't agree with it. So, you know, because I've got another comment where I were against Peter's number 1, and all I wanted to do is see chairs could go away and look at number 6 to get some, you know, to get some clarification on the speakers. That's all I wanted. You know, because we've got to move on. And you can't just keep deferring everything because it goes on for 2 years, 3 years, like Ryan and Richard said. You can't do that. I don't think we can do that. I think we need to nip it in bud now. I think the officer's recommendations is great. This is a great venue, but like officers said, it's just not in planning guidelines. It's just not there yet. We're not going to do it away. It's been open 19 months now. It's got another 19 months to put application and get it back into us. So, where do we go, Chair?
Right, thank you, Gary. Thank you, Councillor Weatherall. That, in actual fact, was supporting the deferral to receive, but changing the conditions slightly. That was supporting the deferral to receive information about noise, and that's what I've heard from a lot of members, even through the comments. So,
Just clarification, Chair, but I don't want number 1. I think number 1 wants taken. Well, I don't want to vote on Peter's number 1. That's all.
I don't think, Councillor Weatherall, that we've actually had anybody who's actually supported that first proposal that we remove the condition number 1. It was, I think, the debate mainly was about condition number 6, and that's what I've heard. So we've got Councillor Sanger's proposal there. That's been seconded. It's been supported that we defer this item until we seek further advice on the issue of condition number 6 and the noise nuisance. Vicky, is that satisfactory in planning terms?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think if the deferral motion is just in respect of the noise condition and that's been seconded, then we should vote on that. Thank you.
Can I just ask, would it be possible to put a limit on how long it can be deferred? I wouldn't want it to get lost in the long grass. So about how long do we think we need to defer it for?
I don't think we're deferring a decision. We're simply deferring a decision today until we've had that report back. And I think officers quite clearly will want to, rather than having this hanging in the air, and I'm looking to officers here, they're going to want some study on the surrounding noise, the background noise, and make recommendations with condition number 6. So we would be expecting to receive it back here as soon as possible.
All I was asking for was, I agree with everything you said, and I'm just asking for an estimate of how long it will take the officers to come up with any relevant information to come back. And I'd rather we got some sort of rough estimate, if you like, so that we've got something that we know is coming back.
Right, if that will comfort you in terms of this deferral, I'll hand over to Chris for an estimate.
Chair, I'm afraid the answer is it depends, but we've got the deadline for the
Chris, you could have a great future in politics.
The deadline for the next agenda is a week today. It might be possible, once we've had a discussion with Environment Protection, for them to recommend a condition. What our conversation will be around is it possible to recommend a condition that allows music to be played outside at a volume which can be controlled. If that's a very simple answer, then it'd be quite possible for us to get a report back for the next meeting. My slight nervousness is if they feel there is a need for some kind of recording of existing noise within the area, which is usually the case, or often the case, and that might involve noise surveys, and that in a normal situation would be paid for by the applicant. But in the first instance, my discussion with Environmental Health will be whether there is a step we can take before we have to consider that. And that's potentially coming back to the next committee, probably if not the one after that. I would imagine that would be my estimate.
Can I say I'm happy with that? If there's a hold up because we're going to have a really good look at it, you could report that back that it's ongoing. But if we get it back as soon as we can, but there may be issues, and I accept that. We might be getting, I'm sorry you can't have it this month, it might be next.
Right, I now propose to move to the vote on the deferral. I'm going to go around the room and ask members if they support that deferral for us to allow, and Vicky will, and Chris will give us a formal wording for the minutes, but it's really to allow us to investigate that an effective condition around condition 6. So, Councillor Little.
Yes, I approve the deferral.
Councillor Humshaw.
Yes, I agree with the deferral as well.
Councillor Prasad-Jay.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Downs.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Price.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Weatherall.
On item 6, we defer in passing the rest, thanks. Yes.
That was you agree with the deferral, Gary, on 6? Yeah, okay, fine. Councillor Woodcock.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, agreed, Chair.
Councillor Davison.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Sanger.
Agree with the deferral, Chair.
And finally, Councillor McCann.
Agreed, Chair.
I make that unanimous, Abby? Right, okay. So, thank officers, thank members for that level of debate, and this item is deferred until such time as we have that appropriate recommendation. Thank you. We take a deep breath now and we move on to our final application for the day, which Chris also has a joy of presenting, and it's application number 20/00406/FUL, and it refers to a garage site between number 31 and number 37 Mearsbrook Road. Would you like to present the report for us, please, Chris?
Well, Chair, thank you. So this is a site currently housing 14 unused, I think almost entirely unused, there might be one still with some occasional use, garages. It's a steeply sloping site within Mearsbrook residential area, slopes down to the Mearsbrook that you can see on that slide there. That forms the rear boundary, but is set quite a way below the level of the site. There are, if you can mind just moving through one or two of the images, please. So you see there that there are two blocks of 2 garages on the front, and then the rest are set at the rear. And you can just see there street trees in close proximity to the front of the property, and I'll mention those shortly. So the proposal is for 4 one-bedroom flats in a building that is over 4 floors, but is actually only 2 stories when read from that position there. The accommodation is over 4 floors, so there's a basement towards the rear as the site slopes, which is common with adjoining properties, and room within the roof space. There's a amenity space proposed within the rear, and 5 car parking spaces towards the back of the site. There have been a number of objections, 25 over 2 sets of 2 rounds of neighbour notification, concern about scale, design, loss of trees within the site and wildlife, traffic generated by the flats, and the impact on the neighbours. The principle is acceptable in use terms. It's within a housing area. It's housing use within a housing area. It is a large site. The density is 50 dwellings per hectare, which is within the range that we would support here. And because of the nature of the site, it's quite a difficult site to develop, and it lends itself towards development towards the front of the site, and perhaps not much to the rear, which limits the density, I think, as well. It reflects the character of the area in terms of its scale and its footprint. We feel the design's appropriate. There's no significant impact on neighbouring properties. If we just go to the drawings, please. They're quite faint, I'm sorry, so I hope they come out okay. Next one down, please. Yeah, there. So, thank you. The proposed building sits in between number 31 and 37. And you can see it's set slightly further back than the two of those, and is in closest proximity to number 37. And you may or may not be able to pick up a 45-degree line drawn on that plan, which is demonstrating that the new building doesn't breach a 45-degree line drawn from the nearest point of the ground floor windows, which is one of our guidelines for an acceptable form of development in terms of it being overbearing. There is a slight concern about vehicles using the car parking area to the rear. You see those 5, they're not garages, those are individual car parking spaces, but access is up the side to the left and up a gradient close to that house number 31. So we're recommending an acoustic screen as part of the boundary treatment there. It's a sustainable location. The parking provision is within our guidelines. There's been an ecology report carried out on the site because it had potential, but that found no priority species or habitats and no significant trees affected. So there are recommendations for biodiversity enhancement, so they will come forward within a condition. If you wouldn't mind just going back to the photographs, I'll say when. There, please. So if we start with that one, that is a highway tree that is adjacent to the access to the site. There are no proposals to amend the access or the ground immediately beneath it, so we're satisfied it's not going to harm the tree. There's been some concern about visibility as a result from neighbours as a result of the position of that, but I think that image shows that parked vehicles are actually more of a hindrance to visibility than the tree. And then the next image on, I think, shows that that's another tree on the other side, which is much further away from the access. And there's the one which was causing the concern in the first instance. So that's it, Chair. It's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Chris. You'll be pleased to note, in terms of flow, we have no speakers to this application. So I'll open this up straight away for members' questions. I can see no questions, so I'll move on to comments. Councillor Davison.
Thank you very much. As far as visibility is concerned, the road sweeps away from that house in an upward direction, which gives more visibility than it would had it been sweeping if it had been sweeping to the right, looking away from the building. So the visibility isn't bad at all. So from that aspect, I see no problem. In fact, I think this would be an ideal development for this piece of land, which looks as if it's been neglected for a long time. It's a waste piece of land, really. And it's there's plenty of room for any nature there, and there's a lovely stream that runs at the back with a very, very deep banking there. So I'm in favour of this particular development. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. I've also got Councillor Price.
Just quickly, Chair, I support everything that's been said. I've visited the site. I think it's an ideal use of that site and brings it into service to the public. So I support the recommendation, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. I've also got Councillor Humshaw. Brian?
Hello. A mention was made in the planning report about a planning condition that could require full detailing of facing and roofing materials to ensure quality, and that's mentioned within the report. I just wanted to clarify that that was within the report. And also I wanted to suggest that actually, yes, we do put that condition in.
So,
it says it could be added, I believe. I believe that was the wording.
right, thank you for that. Right, I'll hand over to you, Chris, for that. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
I'm just checking whether it is normal for a materials condition to be within the list. Yes, condition 11, Chair, it is there.
Yeah, so it is already in.
Yes.
Okay. I just further wanted to sharpen that up because it doesn't say where the materials are going to be drawn from to come into that. And I was going to suggest that the immediately adjacent buildings should be the template for that. That is number 37 and I think number 31.
Is that customary, Chris, to actually direct them? Or what,
It's not customary, Chair. It's what we would do in most cases. We would ensure when we're dealing with applications to approve the materials, our first thought is this appropriate, obviously, for the locality. So it's quite a strong red brick area. So I would expect that is what we would be looking for. If there was support for that to be amended to include, which shall reflect immediately adjacent properties, then I don't think there's any harm in that.
Can I just ask a question from the chair? Would the reason for that condition, in order to ensure an appropriate quality of the development and in the interest of visual amenity in the area, would not that support that? Is it not inherent in that?
It is, Chair, but if members wanted something a bit more explicit, then it could be incorporated. It isn't what we normally do, but it could be. Okay, well, you have the answer there, and I'll leave it out there if anybody wants to second that. And I have Councillor Little. Bernard.
Thank you. Yes, can we look at slides, I think it's number 37 and 38, please?
Is this a question, Councillor?
Yes, it is a question.
Okay.
I mean, it's being said that there isn't much biodiversity there. Well, to my mind, from my experience, that picture shows a heck of a lot of biodiversity in that area, and the ecology issues in the report do point that out. So I think we do need to be aware of that. This isn't sort of an area that is devoid of wildlife. I would say that there's a great deal here, and it talks about a green corridor down that length that would follow the stream at the bottom of that dip. So I think that's a substantial issue. This also suggests that there should be a newt survey done because of the pond, and I think that's important as it is a protected species. I am concerned about the volume of drainage that's going to be necessary because of the amount of driveway space there, so that would considerably lead to more flooding in that area, which I think would be a problem. But in principle, I will be voting against this because I feel that the area needs more family homes, not one. It needs more family accommodation in that area rather than single or one-bed homes. Thank you.
Thank thank you. Chris, do you have any response to that question?
Yes, Chair. So I hope Councillor Little didn't misunderstand my comments around about the ecology when I was introducing it. What I was saying there is there was that we clearly from what you can see of the site and the image that you referred to, we understood there was potential both because of the condition of the site, its overgrown nature, its proximity to the Mears Brook and to the local wildlife site over to the east, that there was potential for significant species within the site. So an ecology appraisal was undertaken, but that whilst it recognised there was wildlife present within the site, it didn't identify the need for protection of any priority species or habitats. So what we may then move to is a condition that requires the developer to put forward a package of biodiversity enhancement measures, which is what is done in line with the reports of the ecology survey, which is, I can't see the condition jumping out at me, Chair, but it is on here. I think it's condition 9. Condition 9. In terms of the nukes, that was a comment made by a neighbour that was investigated and proved not to be correct. So our ecology team's data has no records of any nukes within the site or within a 500-metre radius, which is what we work off. Drainage, the site is, although it's greened, it's largely hard standing across a lot of the areas of the site, and the balance will be fairly similar. We've got a drainage condition which is promoting as a first stop sustainable drainage methods. And then finally on the point about more family houses, our policies that require a mix of uses don't extend to a small-scale development like this. But what I would say is this is introducing one-bedroom units into the area where it is more generally immediately family housing. So I would suggest, Chair, that this is actually providing a bit of a mix within the locality.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. I've got Councillor Hermshaw, you want to make a comment?
Yes, the comment is in connection with flooding, as it's a well-known flooding hotspot down the Mears Brook in a number of different areas. And I've looked through for conditions on flooding, and I haven't been able to spot any, and I don't know if there are any or not.
Chair, back to the previous answer, there is a drainage condition that requires an approach that supports sustainable drainage as a first stop. In terms of flooding, the site is in flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding, apart from a very small portion of the bottom end near the garages, which is in flood zone 2. But that's where the car parking spaces are located. So that wasn't a flood risk assessment was undertaken, and the Environment Agency were happy with that, Chair, and it doesn't pose any kind of risk because the living accommodation is well within flood zone 1.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a final comment from Councillor Sanger. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I shall be supporting the officer's recommendation, but I would like to second Councillor Brian Holmshaw's proposal to strengthen condition 11 to make sure that we use similar materials to the neighbouring properties in terms of visual amenity. I mean, I'm very pleased that the developers, we've come down from 7 apartments to 4. I think that's a much more appropriate development for the size of it. In terms of biodiversity, I mean, the Mears Brook is really important, and wherever we have rivers and streams, that does add to the character of Sheffield. But this development, I think with the appropriate conditions from an ecology point of view, this works as well. This is a piece of land which can cope with this development, and as we've heard before, we do need more housing in Sheffield. So I shall be supporting this. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thank you, Councillor. So we've got a proposal moved and seconded to strengthen condition 11 with reference to the appropriateness of materials. directly relevant to the neighbouring properties, and I'm sure the officers will work the wording of that condition out and in consultation with the chairs. So I just propose to take that on a show of hands. Are members in favour of that? Yep, as far as I can see, that's carried. Thank you. So I'm going to propose directly to the vote on the application now, and the recommendation is to grant conditionally. So for the reasons set out in the report and with the amended condition that we've just voted on, I'm going to go around the room and ask members if they're in favour. Councillor Little.
Reject.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Holmeshaw.
I have to abstain on this application.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Rosalind Joseph.
For the application, Chair.
Chris.
For, Chair.
Councillor Dams.
For, Chair.
Thanks, Tony. Councillor Pride.
For, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. Councillor Weatherall.
For, Chair.
Councillor Woodcroft. Sorry.
For, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. That's safer. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, for, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Davison.
For, Chair.
Thanks, Roger. Councillor Sanger.
For the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thanks, Andy. And finally, Councillor McCann.
For, Chair.
Thanks, Bob. So, Vicky, I make that is carried with one amendment and one abstention. Right. So that's the conclusion of the applications for today. We have a very brief report at the end for noting a record of planning appeals, submissions and decisions. Chris, is there anything that you feel the need to point out to members in that?
No, Chair, there aren't any actual appeal decisions in that list. They're all just records of appeals being received. So there's nothing for me to add.
Thank you, Chris. So can we note that report? Thank you. So thank you to the officers. Thank you for your time today, members. The date of the next meeting is the 22nd of March at 2 p.m. Before we close the meeting, can I just say, I do have apologies to make to the meeting in advance of the next session. Although we will be in the council chamber, because this is where the recording information and the webcasting equipment is that we need to use, because of the proximity to the special council, which is going to talk about the governance arrangements, it will be set out as for a full council meeting. So I do apologise. I know that will be clunky and that won't be as collegiate and as friendly an arrangement that we're normally used to seeing. I can only hope that officers won't spread us about the room in our normal seats and we'll be able to still have some degree of collaboration to the meeting. So thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.